What up, guys? Today we're going to be going through the Doomsday Clock event from DC. Now, I know in my last video on the DC story where I'm going through the whole, dark metal event story, I mentioned that I was going to be doing Heroes in Crisis because that's what happened after the whole Perpetua story event and the Batman Who Laughs story, which I did even prior to the metal event as a whole, right? I did say I was going to cover Heroes in Crisis, but the problem with Heroes in Crisis is two things. One, I felt like the story was pretty stupid and boring. And two, I felt like a lot of the stuff that came from Heroes in Crisis and prior to that, leading up to Heroes in Crisis, is not actually very important to the metal event story as a whole. And I felt like just skipping it. And I'm not going to skip it all completely. I am going to be talking about the last story, which is called Flash Forward, which focuses on Wally West and his journey after the Heroes in Crisis event story, because he had an actual big part to play in that. And he was pretty much the catalyst in that story. So I'll be covering the final story of the Heroes in Crisis event after Heroes in Crisis, which is Flash Forward. Then I will be skipping the other stuff that led up to Doomsday Clock and just focus on Doomsday Clock as a whole, because Doomsday Clock is a multi-year story event. And when I explain all the steps that lead up into Doomsday Clock, you'll understand why I skipped a lot of the stuff, because it was decades in the past, a lot of the stuff that you need to read. And I just felt like that's unnecessary to get into. So I know this video is titled, the Doomsday Clock story event, but I will also be focusing a little bit on the story on the last story of the Heroes in Crisis story event. So it's a little bit of that, the final story of that, and then just Doomsday Clock. So it's going to be a little bit of story of that. And if some of you guys are wondering what happened in the Heroes in Crisis, I'll give you a brief summary on what happened. In that story event, apparently a bunch of heroes were being killed off and they ended up dying, and the mystery was who killed them. Everybody thought it was Booster Gold until they found out that it was actually Wally West. He lost his mind, and in a rage he ended up killing them, and he himself didn't know. And then there was some weird time variant shit with that, and he ended up stopping himself, quit being a superhero, and put himself in prison because of it. And then the Flash Forward story event is happening after that, breaking him out, and this is his journey throughout that to save these other universes from the corruption of the dark multiverse. So that has directly to do with the metal event, but the Heroes in Crisis story stuff and the stuff prior to that leading into it had nothing really to do with that. So I'm just going to skip that and just get into the meat and potatoes of the story event itself. And this is important because in this journey, there's a significant change between Wally West's character that has a significant part to play into the death metal event, which is the final event of the metal story, and I want to get into that one. That's what I always wanted to get into when I first started this thing, right? So I'll get into that. Now, before I do jump into that and explain all my stuff and the process on how I led into this direction, I do want to give a big shout out to a couple new subscribers of mine. I know I haven't done this in a while. I want to give a big shout out to MD Ethna Shermur Rahman. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Jacob Kilwilter, Johnny Nielsen, and Cool316 XN Bay Young Boy. Big thank you to all of you guys for subscribing to the channel. That means a lot. Now, before I get into this, I want to explain some stuff that does happen. When it comes to the Doomsday Clock event, like I explained, there's a lot of stuff that led into that story and a lot of stuff that happened afterwards that is kind of important, and I do want to explain that. Now, when it came to the Heroes in Crisis stuff, there was stuff like Batman I Am Gotham, then Flash Wars, Red Hood and Outlaws Annual #2, and then there's Heroes in Crisis, The Price of Other Tales. So if you want to get into the Heroes in Crisis and those stories, you can go check those out. But I'm just going to be focusing on Flash Forward, which has some importance to the death metal event. And then when it comes to Doomsday Clock, the reason why I skipped a lot of stuff that was prior to Doomsday Clock was, like I stated, it was a multi-decade type of thing. First, you have to read the original Watchmen, where you see, Dr. Manhattan in it, which was in 1985, which was decades ago. Then you have Flashpoint, which was in 2012. Then you have the Dark Side Wars, which I think was around 2016. And then you have DC Rebirth. And then you have Batman and Flash, The Button, which was talking about the story event leading into Dr. Manhattan and his connection to the DC multiverse. So it does have some importance to this, but I felt like it's not important to talk about that either, because it's simple. This is Batman and the rest of the DC characters realizing that there's a being outside of their universe, and multiverse that is interrupting with them and messing things up. So this is what leads into their understanding of Dr. Manhattan to a certain point. And we know when he took out Reverse Flash, he basically destroyed him. So he does have connection there. And then Doomsday Clock is just when they purely get into that story. So I just wanted to skip that. And I just wanted to explain that. So if you guys want to check those out, you can to get a better understanding of Doomsday Clock, but you don't really need to check them out. So with that being said, I think we can now get into the actual story itself. When we start off for the Flash Forward story event, it starts off with this one cosmic being named Neged or something like that. I forgot. His name's not important. He basically is a being that was there before the universe and the multiverse was created, and he's there to, in the bleed space, to govern over these universes and make sure there is no, problems with it. There's no mistakes. There's no damage. He's basically like a cosmic security watching over these universes as his, sectors to protect. And he doesn't interfere unless there's something that is very, seriously affecting it as a whole. And that's his job. And he starts to talk about the dark multiverse and the effects of it and why he needs, Wally West in this journey. He goes on to say something moving, even dared imagine until today. For every good thought there's an existence, every act of kindness, a dark twisted opposite exists. In those moments, the dark universe is created, the dark multiverse is forever destined for decay, but now an anomaly beyond reckoning prevents the timelines from forcing entropy from destroying the important alternate realities. So we already know this, that the dark multiverses were created as these, testing, universes from the fears and despair of the people and the heroes, and it created this dark, corrupted versions of them. And they weren't meant to last. They were meant to be destroyed and absorbed back into the Forge itself. So he's just reiterating that story and that plot point about the dark multiverse and the decay of it. And he's stating that these universes were supposed to be destroyed, but something happened at some point where these universes were just not being destroyed and somehow staying around, and that was because of the Batman Who Laughs and Barbados, and then leading into Perpetua. So we already know all this stuff, and the corruption is still staying there and is affecting these other universes, and he needs to stop it, so he needs help. And he goes on to say, with nowhere ever to fall, the dark multiverse is rising, its veiled, toxic, all-encompassing despair bleeding outward onto the healthy world, inboarding the barriers that separate dark and light, pure, concentrated evil erupting onto the 52 known universes. I'm assuming that unsavoring task defense of the multiversal barrier, but contaminating catastrophe such as this is unpredictable, is against every commandment of the Fugonauts to reach out to another. So yeah, they're the Fugonauts, and apparently they're a collective, but it's like, I guess, a hive mind or whatever. But he's just explained that the dark multiverse was meant to be destroyed, but now it's not, and it's rising. We already saw this with the Barbados stuff, where he's trying to make the dark multiverse rise and make the positive matter multiverse come down. When it comes down, it'll be destroyed and absorbed into the Forge, and then these unhealthy, corrupted universes and this dark multiverse will come and take its place and then just be there. And we talked about that quite a bit. And he's talking about how it's affecting it, and his job and his, hive mind's job is to protect the multiverse and these other universes, these barriers, so they don't connect with each other and collide, but something is corrupting them. And this is directly the dark multiverse's effect happening on this, and he has to stand in its way to stop it, but he just can't do it. So this is when he picks Wally West to help him out. And then he sends Wally West to different universes to basically purify the corruption from these dark multiverses. So he gives him this rod, and he goes, and the first one he goes into is the one where they have the Black Superman, who is pretty much Obama. He goes to save it. He says, turns out there are a ton of separate universes out there, a multiverse not counting the dark multiverse where nightmares go to die. So this is a little confusing because you would think Wally West already would know about the multiverse. Everybody knows about the New 52 universe and all these other multiverses and all these other universes, but he doesn't. I don't know the context on why. Some of you guys, if you might have the information, you can explain it to me, but he, for some reason, does not know that there's other universes. He's surprised by it, which is weird to me, but yeah, he was surprised that there's other universes, and then he mentions that there's the, multiverse, which is obviously the 52 universes, and then that's not including the dark multiverse, which got introduced. So he's just catching up on the story right now, and he's there to save them and fix them from the corruption. And then we see his ability and his power, and he says, I push myself further and faster than anyone has ever moved before, faster than light and thought, faster than the speed force. I race around the globe and purge the darkness, leaving light in my wake. So this is him purging it. This is important because he states that he's gone faster than anyone has ever had, and he moves faster than light and thought, and that's important. And then he says even the speed force. Now, the reason that's important is because a lot of people that talk about, certain characters that is speed, they talk about, oh, this character is faster than light. And that's impressive, but there's also another impressive comparison, which is the speed of thought. And both in Marvel and DC, apparently the speed of thought is faster than the speed of light. In our world, the way we think, the information that's being signaled through our brains, throughout our body, is not that fast, is not faster than light. I think it moves around somewhere 41 miles per hour or something like that. I could be wrong, but I know it's nowhere near the speed of light. But in comics, the speed of thought is technically faster than the speed of light. So if you move faster than the speed of thought, you're moving even faster than the speed of light, and you're moving at high levels of speed. And not only did he surpass that, but he also surpassed, the speed force itself, which is pretty impressive. Then later on, we do see Flash doing this one pose, which this is the common thing we see with Wally West when people glaze him, saying, oh, look at this pose, they show it in the edits and stuff like that. So I just thought that would be interesting to show. This is him trying to break free from all of his disillusion and the darkness within him, and trying to connect to the Mobius chair. So after this, we have the Fugonaut talking about the whole, situation. And he talks about how he's seen the entire universes and, suns and galaxies going and getting destroyed throughout each life. There's beings feared the most. The dark multiverses, while all those fears manifest themselves in a temporary worlds, over time these worlds wither and die, flaring like a supernova, and they expected. So I listed Wally West singularity and all the multiverse to prevent this from one world for being about destruction of other. So he right here is explaining that he has seen a lot of worlds being changed and destroyed throughout all these crisis event stories. And now we see this dark multiverse manifesting, and it comes from the living beings' fears, which they talk about quite a bit, and it's corrupting everything. And he needed, Wally West because he was important. And even though Wally West at this point did some horrible things, he did still have good in him, and it was important. Now, Wally West, throughout this entire story, needed this rod to basically purify these worlds, and he thought this rod was what it was doing that, and it was necessary, but the Fugonaut basically explains to him, no, it was never the rod itself. It was within you. It was the hope in you as a good man. It's just that you didn't know how to use that. Now, the rod is basically a conduit that can use his hope to fight back the darkness, because the darkness is despair. So you can fight back the darkness, which is basically the equivalence of despair, with hope and light, which he was using Wally West's hope and light. So his kindness and his goodness with him. It's just that Wally West couldn't do it through his own power. He was using his own power, but he didn't know how to direct it, so he had to create that. And then we see this is the big change, and this is the real importance on why I use this story event. And this was, Wally West's, story arc. So we see as he touches the Mobius chair basically gives him profound, knowledge. It gives you knowledge, and we see his change and stuff. So now not only is he really fast, but he has all the vast knowledge of the universe and significance of it, and then he has to leave his kids. So this is his journey, and when we do see the death metal event, we do see him in the Mobius chair and in this version. So that's why I felt like covering it, because you're going to see him and you're like, wait, why the hell is he in blue? Why the hell does he have the Mobius chair's power? It's going to be a little confusing, and that's pretty big story in there. So I felt like it was important to get into that. But that was the end of the Flash Forward story event and the importance and significance of that. Now we're going to get into the Doomsday Clock story event, which starts out with Ozymandias and Rorschach basically trying to get John, who is the real human version name of Dr. Manhattan, to help them out. Because in their universe, they were having that whole Civil War stuff. If you watched the Watchmen movie or, read the comics, you would know in that story event what happened was Ozymandias basically planned out this fake alien invasion thing and this destruction to prevent the Cold War. Because in their story event, at that time, it was 1985 when the story was written, which was, America versus Russia. And there was this whole thing of big fear about nuclear fallout and war. And we had the whole Cold War to prevent that. And if it did, it would have destroyed everything. And in this story, they covered it as in the aspect that the Cold War was going to happen, and the worst things that would come out of it did come out, which was basically the nukes dropping. And that was their story, but in DC, they had a different way, right? And their story, this is important because in their timeline is basically stuck in one uh, linear position, whereas DC kind of changes quite a bit and kind of reverts its way all the way back every time. So I think that's important. Um, so we see both Ozymandias and Rorschach coming there, and he mentions to him that we're in Gotham and we're in a different world. So he came from his universe, left it with Rorschach to come to the DC universe. The reason why he left to come here is because, one, there's a lot of civil unrest in their universe, which 70 years have passed from 1985 to 1992, and the Cold War is getting so bad to the point where there might be a nuclear war and the end of everything. So there's a serious problem happening. So he needs Dr. Manhattan to help him out. But Dr. Manhattan's not in his universe anymore. He left to the DC universe at that story event. So when it was 1985 and all this stuff was happening, he left to the DC universe to go to someplace else. And he basically said, screw you guys. I don't care about you. Your problems are your own. It's not my problems. And he went there. And since it got to a critical point and Ozymandias couldn't, fix the problem, he went there to get him. And he's trying to understand this world and explain it to Rorschach himself also. As they go, they research in the libraries in Gotham. It says, although there are vast differences between our Earths, the greatest divergence is the sheer number of men and women wearing masks, including someone who are internally fictional on our world. Fictional on our world, maybe Manhattan created them, or he could be one of them. It's possibly as John stuff. So he said, those who are wearing the costume, most of them are superhumans, and the Dr. Manhattan problem 100-fold. So he's basically explained the difference between their universes. In the Watchmen universe, they do have heroes, but there's very few, and it's just them. And they're not that really powerful. Most of them are just regular people, like Ozymandias and Rorschach. Whereas in the DC one, they have countless other ones. Most of them are metahumans. Most of them are really powerful, like Dr. Manhattan. Not on his level, but still powerful like him. And they're considered fictional in their world. Whereas in the DC multiverse and stuff, they're obviously real. The only being that has actual real power is technically, Dr. Manhattan, and that's why he's a godlike being. So he left and went to DC multiverse, which is kind of ironic because even though they do have countless other powerful cosmic beings, technically he's still considered a godly being to even them with all their cosmic beings. Then we see later on, as they come there, there's also these two clown people that come from their world and some other people from, from the Watchmen universe. There is his people there, but also in the Watchmen universe, there is civil unrest happening there, and then there's some bad situation happening here. And both Ozymandias and Rorschach go to separate counterparts to basically ask for help. Ozymandias goes to Lex Luthor since he's considered the smartest man in the world, and they both are kind of similar characters. And then Rorschach goes to Batman because he's also considered very smart and very useful, and he's kind of like Rorschach. But as this happens, Batman betrays Rorschach, puts him in prison, an Arkham prison, because he thinks he's crazy, which he kind of is. And Ozymandias, as he's pulling up to Lex Luthor does not, see him as an equal, and he's like, oh, this guy's whatever, but he gets attacked by the comedian, who somehow survived the Watchmen stuff where, Ozymandias was trying to kill him in the beginning of it. But he survived. He ends up actually attacking Joker and attacking Ozymandias, but Ozymandias actually survives and escapes. But as this happened, Batman basically gets beaten up and captured by the Joker, and we see it, and he pulls up and catches these two clowns too, and he's basically threatening them, saying he would kill them. But he has Batman chained up, and he's enacting his plan. As they move forward, they find the other Gotham villains in this underground tunnel, and they're basically talking about their plans because as this is happening, both the DC main universe and the Watchmen universe are having some big controversial moments, whereas in the Watchmen universe, they're having a nuclear fallout between Russia and America, and there might be a nuclear war, and Ozymandias is trying to prevent it. In the DC universe, there's this thing called the Superman theory or super metahuman theory or whatever, where it's basically saying that superhumans are a danger and they're going to kill them all, and Superman's a danger, and Superman's getting all the brunt of the criticism from it because of that. So there's a big crisis there, and it's also between Russia and America. That's not important. I just wanted to focus mostly on Dr. Manhattan and him because, if I'm being honest, I think that's what we care more about than the politics. But as this is happening, there's a lot of chaos and confusion happening. So the villains of Gotham are just trying to wonder on how to deal with this. And as they're talking, Joker pulls up with Batman there. and they're all there now expecting, but the comedian breaks through and he attacks a bunch of people. He kills a bunch of people. He even shoots the Riddler in the leg, and there's a bullet that hits Mr. Freeze in the head. So that's important. And there's quite a bit of chaos happening and confusion. Also, at this time that this is happening, Ozymandias is going with his plan and plot, and he pulls up to the first Green Lantern and Stargirl, who's from the future. As he's pulling up to them, he has this one cat thing throughout this entire story. He explains to the Rorschach what's the importance of the cat. He says, I cloned this Barbados from the remains of the original who had been disintegrated with John. She's getting John sent from them from that lantern. So he basically created and cloned this cat that has a connection to John, which is Dr. Manhattan, and can direct him to Dr. Manhattan. So it's kind of like a compass, and he's able to find some energies within the original Green Lantern's lantern. And it's actually a lantern, like a lamp, like a genie lamp, because if you guys know anything about, the Green Lanterns in DC, you would know that the original first Green Lantern, actually his power was not cosmic or like created from it wasn't supposed to be like construct. It was supposed to be magical, and it had this effect, but it has some connection with Dr. Manhattan himself specifically also. So now Ozymandias is using this to attract John there, and we see as he's absorbing the energy from, the Green Lantern's lantern and absorbing it into the cat who has a connection to him to summon, what's the name? Dr. Manhattan. And he does, and he tries to get Dr. Manhattan to see his side and say, hey, you need to help us out and save our world. And he's like, you know what? If I'm being honest, I left that world because I don't give a shit. He's like, I'm tired of that world. And he even says, at first I thought I might find a place among them, but something happened as I looked forward. I saw a vision of the most hopeful among them heading towards me, how hopeless, and now I saw nothing. So he's talking about Superman. He said, I'm done with that world. I don't care about it. I came to this world. I have more interest in this, and I came here to find hope and better understanding. And what I found was the version of hope, which is Superman, is basically heading towards me angry, and he says now it's hopeless, and he doesn't see anything else past that, which is insane because, Dr. Manhattan is very powerful, and he has the ability to kind of see forward in time and manipulate it. He's like a higher dimensional being who's above time itself and can see throughout that and do different effects on it. So the fact that he can't see past that and the effects on what's happening with Superman, there has to be some significance. So he's trying to understand that. And he goes on to say, I check off the checkboard floor and the surface of Mars. I've overcome the curiosity from the first time since 1959. A month in the future, I see Superman. He's yelling at me through the defeat of the thunder from the world falling apart and around us. And we see Superman charging in at him. Then we have him further on going on to say his eyes burn with anger that throws his fist forward. And now I see nothing, a year, a century, a millennia, still nothing. I don't see something tomorrow. I wonder what month from now, or will I destroy everything? So he is confused now. He's saying that he sees that Superman is a symbol of hope, but for some reason the symbol of hope is mad at him and trying to attack him a month in the future. And as he tries to attack him, he doesn't see anything else after that. For some reason, his vision of the future, which normally he could see, is shut off, and he can't see within a year, a century, or even a millennia. Still nothing happens, and he's wondering, the reason why I don't see anything happening because I'm killed within that future, so I can't see past that because I'm dead? Or is it because I destroy everything and there is nothing to see within the universe itself? And this is important. And then we see him explaining his effects on the multiverse as he says, or the universe itself. He says, it's December 27th, 2019. A boy sacrificed his life to save Earth's son. Although his body is destroyed, his ring survives. The inspiration sends the ring, creating back through time like a tachyon particle. It's been December 20th, 3900. The boy died, is alive. He sweats under his iron mask, in addition to join the Justice League amongst them. I think then he also goes on to say, as he's done with that December 330, there's nothing but darkness. November 2002, there's still nothing. March 2000, and then he says a bunch of time prior to that. And he says, 1 week from now, the last thing I see is Superman and his rage, his cape is torn and his hands stained with blood. I stand on Mars unable to answer but a single question: does Superman destroy me or do I destroy everything? So once again, he reiterates his point that what is happening is once when he meets up with Superman in a month, something happens. He doesn't know if Superman kills him or he destroys the entire universe. Whatever happens, it makes his mind and his perception of the future go blank until he gets to this time where it's year 3019, around like December, right? And he can't check prior to that. He sees nothing. Even year 3002, he can't see nothing, or these other time periods, because for some reason something happens that might equate to any of those points in time that might prevent it. So from that time when that happens to the year 3019, there's a bunch of blank. And the reason why 3019 is important is one of the I forgot, they're called the Super Legion or something like that, but is the Justice League in the future and the year 3000. They basically have time machine type of technology, and they transport young Clark Kent from the past to the future to basically explain his importance and then send him back. So there's like a little bit of a time paradox or connection right there that connects to there. So that's why he can go only to that point. Because at that point, they created a time paradox by going back in time and contacting past Superman to talk to him into the future. So that's what he can't see between there. And that's a specific and significant time event and Superman's story and journey. And then he goes on to say, 5 days and 3 hours ago, the detonation of Earth creates a tachyon fog obscuring the immediate past and the future. Looking in the present is immediately surrounding, has beings trying to read through a kaleidoscope. What is hoping to accomplish? No, nothing. That as the tachyon particles finally begin to fade, I'm able to probe into the past and following them into their source. This is also important because he keeps on mentioning throughout the story afterwards, tachyon particles, tachyon. Now, we know tachyon is like light particles. I can search it up later, but it doesn't really matter. The way that Dr. Manhattan can see into the future is through these tachyon particles. With these tachyon particles, he can see through the future. But if these tachyon particles are messed up, he kind of has a problem to see. So he himself says that there's a fog of tachyon particles that obscure the immediate past and future to him. And then after this fog starts to fade away, then he's able to actually see into it. So even though Dr. Manhattan's really powerful and he can see an effect throughout the, time stream from back and forth at any point, just like a higher dimensional being, if you're a fourth dimensional being, you can transport yourself throughout all of time, right? He still does have limitations. He can see and kind of affect it throughout those points, but if there's a high level of tachyon fog, apparently he cannot see through it. So this is kind of a description for that. He's basically just saying that he's kind of blind and he can't see past it. So yes, he can see and affect the future, but there are certain limitations, and at a certain point, he can't see past that. Also, the reason why the Green Lantern battery did have a connection, to his power is because he was messing with time, and as he was messing with time, he was not only, going through Superman's story, he was also going through big story events like, the Justice League or the Justice Society of America story, the Green Lantern's lantern, which his energy was directly affecting that. So every time he was messing with different points in time and trying to orchestrate it to get a better understanding of the strings of time, he was basically leaving a bit of his energy there, and that residual energy was being traced by Ozymandias later on in the future to see his effects throughout time itself and see what he's doing and why is he doing this. And he himself doesn't know why he's doing this. He's just trying to expect what is happening in the story event and what's happening with Superman. He's very interested in Superman's journey and this multiverse as a whole and his place in it and how he's affecting it. And there's something he says that I forgot to take a screenshot. I think I deleted or whatever, but I'll just say it. And it's important to his power and what, he does in the story as a whole too. But I'll get into that a little bit later. So we see after that, him trying to understand the Justice League at this point and the rest of the people on Earth don't notice, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan notices them all. He's playing the strings with Superman in this whole event with the whole, Superman theory thing. And he's just confused what happens that leads to that situation later on in the future. It is a little bit forward in the future. But as he's doing this, at one point, he attacks Superman and drops this light that basically puts him in a coma. And because Superman was being attacked by some of the other heroes, and there was this whole thing with Black Adam and having in his land and nation to allow metahumans in there because the humans are now against the metahumans, and he's letting the metahumans in there, and he's saying this is a safe haven for them. And Superman is kind of torn between, his idea with, Black Adam. Now, that's, like I said, not important because we care more about this impressive stuff. That is just like this small politics shit, which does have some importance, but if I'm being honest, it's kind of boring. So I'm going to skip those, but just know that Superman was getting attacked, and at one point, there's a flash of light that knocked him out, and they're like, who could have hit him with this much power? They thought it was Firestorm because he was fighting against Firestorm Superman, but they're like, there's no way he could generate that much power, and then they found out it was Dr. Manhattan who hit him. So now he's in a coma, and then the Justice League found out that, wait, actually this energy cannot come from Firestorm. It has to come from something else, and there's some connection to something that's, interfering with our universe. And we feel the energy, we scan the energy, and it's in Mars, which that's where he was. So they pull up on him, and they're now trying to find out who the hell is this guy, and what the hell is he doing? And Martian Manhunter and Guy Gardner are the first to approach him, and they talk to him, and he's just saying, they're protesting a power they fear. I don't understand. Excuse me, I was talking to Reynold Raymond 6 minutes from now. The Takians are muddling things up. They're looking for awareness. Don't ask questions up to. So what is happening here? Since he can, he sees through the future and connect to the future back and past, throughout the future and past and all of time, his mind does get a little bit muddled up, and it kind of seems like he's a little crazy. But the best example of this is like in AOT. If you watched, Attack on Titan, Eren Yeager, we find out his Titan power is the ability to see through time, the past, present, and future, and affect it, and that messes up his brain, and he just doesn't understand. Same thing happens with Dr. Manhattan. Even though Dr. Manhattan is on a far more powerful level and has more of a higher level of control of that, he still himself also has limitations and misunderstandings of it. So he is talking to Ryan Reynolds, or whatever his name is, and that is Firestorm's real name. So he's talking to him 6 minutes in the future while they're pulling up, and they're saying, what the fuck's happening? So that was what was happening there. So Guy Gardner is tired of his shit and tries to attack Dr. Manhattan. As he does, he's like, oh, this is interesting. I want to understand this right. So he grabs onto it and absorbs the energy and basically takes him out. So this is interesting because of, one, he's so powerful he can just absorb the energy from the Green Lantern ring. But also, two, he is also still kind of like a child. Even though he's very powerful, he's not all-knowing. He still has a lot of things that he doesn't understand, even though he's been in the DC main universe forever. But as this is happening, he's now getting attacked by all the magic users, and he goes on to say, you all believe you are wielding magic, and I must perform a deeper analysis, but I see that the power you harness is in reality the scraps of creation, like the random errors in a computer code discarded and forgotten, left to us to pick up and use for those who also find themselves discarded and forgotten. So he's like, oh, I want to understand magic. He's like, you guys call this magic, but in reality, it's just scraps from the beginning of creation. So when the creation of the universe and the multiverse happened, that's how magic was created, and it has some connection to it. And because of that, they misunderstand magic as just, this is magic, but it's just the energies from the beginning of creation. Now he's understanding it, and he says it feels good to still learn. Now, this is important. The reason why I'm putting these parts in is a lot of people mention how powerful he is, and when usually you talk about how powerful a character is, they say he's all-knowing. But that isn't always true. Just because a character is very powerful does not mean that they're all-knowing. Dr. Manhattan is very powerful, and he can see through time, but he's still not all-knowing. As this happened, the rest of them are attacking him, and he's just like, this is interesting. And Green Arrow literally says, not as invulnerable as he looks. So even though Dr. Manhattan is powerful, he's not invulnerable. He can be damaged, even though obviously he's holding back and he's just more curious than anything. He can be damaged, but it doesn't have really effect. So then Captain Atom comes up and says, you know what, screw this. I'm going to attack you, and then I'm going to take you down. So he fires his energy blast at Dr. Manhattan and overloads his body and destroys him. He says, forget Superman. Captain Atom is the last thing you'll ever see. And Captain Atom, sometimes people say he's very powerful, sometimes he's very weak. It really depends. But he actually shows his insane power because even though you might think, well, Captain Atom can't harm or affect, Dr. Manhattan, he apparently does and ends up destroying him. And we see this pretty cool panel as he's walking, and he's just like a brain and his nervous system, but he's regenerating. So he is very powerful, but he's also not as powerful as a lot of people try to make him out to be. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. But if he was super powerful, that wouldn't have had any effect on him. But also, he's not weak because it didn't kill him. he was able to just regenerate, and he acted casual about it, but it was still able to destroy his body. So he's technically kind of vulnerable, but not vulnerable. But then after this, we have he has more of an understanding of the DC multiverse and the universe, and it's a little confusing. But when you think about it outside of the context of comics and his perception of it, it does make sense to us, and it's kind of pretty basic. So he goes on to say, a theoretical physicist named Bryce Dwight hypothesized that the universe was constantly splitting into alternative timelines. The many worlds interpretation is theorized the parallel worlds were endlessly created, following out like the time branch of a tree. Heroes of the Earth call it the multiverse, and this is a world in its center. The world was introduced to Superman in April 18th, 1938, and he was the first of the costume heroes. Then he goes on to say that it's 1956. Superman is seen in Metropolis for the first time 25 years earlier than the winds changed on the farms of Kansas. Jonathan and Martha Kent, the orphan boy, and then they're just talking about it, and he says, Carver Coleman never heard of the Superman before an outside force shifted his arrival forward in time. The reverberations of this change affected not this world, but every world in the multiverse. And then he goes on to say that it's October 8, 1986. His arrival on Earth has shifted forward again. His arrival changes again and again, and then he goes on to say that I don't want to be any different. I want to be Clark Kent. I want to be your son, Clark. I don't understand this universe. So he's really confused on what's happening in this universe because he sees that Superman's timeline and his story keeps on moving forward, and he's wondering why. Then he goes on to say, but it's 1949. A young Clark Kent cites his parents by his parents besides the passed away. It's 1956. I watched Clark visit the graves of his parents. It's October 1986. His parents are alive. Years later, Jonathan Kent dies again in his son's arms. And then he goes on to finally just say that I begin to believe that they misinterpreted what this universe actually is. I look into the future following Superman's trail of the influence. How can one man affect so much, even the thousands of years from now? So what is happening? What is pretty much happening is that he's realizing that the universe is not as linear as he thought, because he thought that time was going in one linear path. But apparently that first Superman was shown in 1938, which was when Superman was originally shown in real life, and the first comic book issue, which was the Golden Age. And he was shown then, and that was his origin story. And after that, they continued on in his story, and it was progressing. But then something happened where, they had another event where they had Silver Age, where they redid everything again and changed everything in 1956. Then they did it again in 1986 and stuff like that, around the 70s and stuff. And they keep on changing it. So he said, wait. I thought the timeline was going to go one path, but it keeps on going one way. Then it stops. Then it reverts, but it goes forward in the future and then restarts the story again. And it keeps on doing it. And Superman's journey and story is, the universe just keeps on resetting, but it goes around Superman and then goes into the future itself, also connected to Superman. Now, inside the universe of you just hear this is like, whoa, that's pretty, interesting. That's very kind of confusing. But in our world, it's just understanding that these are just the different eras of DC. We know in comics, they redo the story over and over and over again. It started off in 1938. They had the Golden Age, and then 1956 where they had the Silver Age, then 1970 something where they had the Bronze Age. Then 1986 was the end of the Bronze Age, and then that was the end of the post-crisis, and we get pre-crisis. Then we get into other story events, and we, the New 52, Rebirth, all this shit. So he's realizing that there's changes. It goes one path, then it stops, then redoes it again. He's just basically, as us, as the viewers, as we're watching this and we're like, oh, they're redoing it again and again and again. The only difference is he doesn't understand this. We do. Right. So it's not that confusing. It's very simple. It's in the real world. It's, comic book stories have to continue on and they have to progress into the future. So as time changes, they redo the story again, just in the more present day. And then they change the story up here and there, and they keep on redoing the same thing. And the reason why it's around Superman is because he was the first superhero for DC, and one of the first superheroes. He's not the first superhero, but he was one of the first superheroes, and at least for DC, right? So its importance right around there. So That's why he's like, why is it integral around Superman's story? It's because, well, Superman was the first superhero created for DC, and then it created the whole stories, and then they had to redo everything. So that's why it's around him. And then the future, it's just because the story event of Clark Kent being pulled as a kid or a teenager into the future and learning about his future self and then going back. So this has shaped him further in his story. And he's just wondering what's happening. But us as viewers, we already know they do this all the time, right? These revamps. And the reason why it's significant for him is because from where Dr. Manhattan's from, right? And his timeline, the Watchmen's timeline, it's actually different than how DC works. DC, they revamp it and keep on doing it. Whereas in the Watchmen timeline, it's linear. So the first comic came out around 1985. And now that they're in the future, right? It came out in 1985. The story event was around like 2016, 2018. I don't know when, right? But obviously far more in modern time. But from all that time and decades past, guess how much time only passed? 7 years. It went from 1985 to 1992, right? And the difference is the DC main timeline continuity, it has to change with the times, so they have to keep on revamping it. Whereas the Watchmen universe, they don't really care. It doesn't have to keep up with modern times. They can keep it back in the past. They are going to develop it a little bit forward into the future, but just from that timeline. They're not going to redo everything again. So Dr. Manhattan's from that timeline. Time there would go linear and slower, and they don't redo things again. Whereas this, they redo things over again, and it changes and it moves with our time. Whereas that one, the time is slower. So even though 7 years have passed in the Watchmen's timeline, within the main DC continuity, it's moved with us, which is decades. It started in 1938, and then at that time it was like 2016 or 2018, which was multiple decades past. Whereas the Watchmen story started in 1985, and now it's 2016 stuff, but only 7 years have passed. So that's why he's confused and saying, I don't understand this universe, because that's not how it works when it comes to Watchmen. They don't redo it over and over and over again. Now, before I get into the next stuff, I do want to mention the thing I talked about a little bit before that I felt like was important. It was a statement by Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan stated, and he was talking about the whole Flashpoint story, where he messed with the Flashpoint stuff. Originally, in 2012, we thought that the Flashpoint, universe that was created and the whole stuff changes to the multiverse and all this new stuff with the New 52 was created by the Flash, Barry Allen going into the past. But then we found out later on that that wasn't true. It was actually Dr. Manhattan who was messing with it and pulling the strings. And we thought that it was him, so it was him the entire time, right? So a lot of people were led to believe that, well, if he was the one who created the, Flashpoint story event and the New 52 and all this stuff, that must mean that he's so powerful that he can control everything and he has this godlike level of power. It is true, he does have that, but the problem with that is the whole strings thing is he mentions himself that, yes, he did change it, and he can see the strings that is, manipulating the multiverse with the cosmic level of stuff. He can't see it, but he also himself states that he himself is also one of the puppets on the string. The only difference between him and the rest, like, Superman or Batman and stuff that keep on changing and getting controlled by the timeline changes, right? They're considered like puppets on a string, and the string is the timeline. Every time the timeline changes, the string moves around and it changes these puppets and their movements and what they do. Now, Dr. Manhattan is not affected by that in that technical sense because he's outside of it. He gets to see it, and that's why he was confused, right? But he himself, even though he can see it, he himself is also a puppet on that string. He directly states that, yes, he can see the strings, and these strings directly affect the rest of the characters in DC and redoes their story, and they can't really change that. He himself is also a part of the strings, and a lot of people try to say, well, he can control and mess with the timeline and do whatever. Not really. He has some control, but he himself is also a puppet. So yes, he has some control over the strings, but from his own mouth himself, verbatim, he stated that the only difference between him is he's not controlling the strings, and they're the puppets being controlled by the strings. He himself is also a puppet being controlled by strings. The only difference is he can see them. So that's what he has. He has the higher perception, but does not have higher control over that. But then later on, we see him talking about, I realize that this universe is much more than appears and is all connected to him. So he sees that this universe, because the reason why he left the Watchmen universe is he stated that it was too complex and too confusing and he wanted to go to someplace simple. And then he found out that this universe is far more complex than that. And not only is it complex, but is directly and significantly centered around Superman. And then he mentions all the other events that happen with the antimatter and all this stuff with Superman's timelines. And he's like, I grow curious, and others have done. I move to reshape the universe so that I might see how it forms around Superman and change the past to challenge the future. And reality comes crashing down. I realize that this universe is not part of the multiverse as others believe. So now he's just saying that, well, he saw this stuff happening in centered around Superman. He was wondering why, and he wants to understand better. So he started to try to mess with the timelines. First, he was trying to understand the timeline and the strings. Then he started to manipulate a little bit. He has some control, but not full control. And then he was wondering why Superman's so integral. And so he changes the past and the future to see his importance there. And then he himself realized that this universe is not just one of the many multiverse. It is actually a main and integral part of the multiverse. We already know this as it's considered the prime universe, and whatever happens in the prime universe has effects on the multiverse. Of the prime universe and prime Earth is destroyed, then the rest of the multiverse and the rest of the DC 52 universes or even infinite universes will be affected and destroyed. And then he goes on to say the multiverse reacts to the universe. There has been endless parallel worlds. None, 52, dark multiverse, all created changes this universe. This universe stands apart from the multiverse. It is the metaverse and its persistence and change. And I removed the linchpin to the Justice Society of America. I changed Superman once again. So what is he saying now? He just goes on to say, well, the multiverse reacts to this universe specifically. They are all their own separate universes, but this one specifically is unique. And at one point, there was just this universe, which we know originally there was one universe. Then there was Endless, which was, the infinite universes. Then there were none, which he was basically talking about, the antimatter and the Crisis on Infinite Earth story event, where he technically wiped out all the other universes, and then there was 5 and they merged into one. So then you're saying that there was only one, and then that one split apart into 52, which we had the new 52. Then there's the dark multiverse, where they went from one universe to an infinite amount of universes to all this infinite wiped out to one. Then that one split back into another 52, and then there was apparently only 52, but then we found out that there was a dark multiverse, and then it created and things changed, and every time they changed, it was specifically because of that universe, and they're saying that this one stands apart from it, and it's a metaverse, which basically means it's the prime universe. If you mess with the prime universe, the multiverse gets messed with. If you change another universe, it's not going to affect the other universes, but when it messes with the prime or the metaverse, it changes that. And if you affect or change Superman, who's integral to the prime, universe, then you change big events throughout the multiverse and mainly that universe. So he did that, and Superman's the linchpin of not only the universe, but the multiverse as a whole, because the universe is the linchpin to the rest of the multiverse, and Superman's the linchpin of that universe. So it's like he is the higher scaling of that changes, and he himself has been changing and affecting Superman to see how that changes the rest of the linchpin universe. And then he says, I watched taking my take on this universe reshapes into reality Superman sent to as a child. So this is his take on changing it, and he's just watching and trying to see and understand what is happening. And then he talks about like all the different events where we see Superman where he was in deep powered state, and then we see him coming back as New 52 and stuff. And then he says, a year ago, the metaverse became aware of my hubris. So he's saying, I got cocky at a certain point, think I can mess with the, metaverse however I wanted. But after a while, the metaverse itself is able to realize, even though I'm powerful, that does not mean I can do whatever I want and have no, consequences. So before this, he was basically messing with the main universe to affect the rest of the multiverse and messing with Superman to see how this effects happen. And then this was having a big part to play in it. But as he was doing that and messing with the rest of the multiverse, right? He realized that the metaverse was also realizing that, hey, you're messing with me. And not only was the universe realizing that, but the beings in that universe was also realizing it, saying, I realize that the metaverse is not passive. It's like an organism fighting to survive. There are aspects that I have understand it and innate hope that fights back into the surface. Sorry, I'm going to try to edit Dr. Manhattan's dick out of this. They have his dick in the shot, and I don't want to have that in there. I'm going to try to edit that out. I've never done that before. If it's in there, sorry, I couldn't find a way. But if I can, I'll try to put something around there, like some black space or some shit. But what he's saying is, first, I was messing with it. Then it started to realize, and I got cocky, and it's not passive. It's not something that is just, this universe is not just something you can do whatever to it, and nothing will happen from it, right? It's not like I can just stand outside of it. it's like an organism. If you mess with it, at some point it's going to realize something is messing with it, and then it's going to, interact back with it. And not only the universe, but also the beings within that universe, which we saw Wally West was able to see him. And he's like, who the hell are you? And this is when Wally West was going through the time and giving warnings and stuff like that. And he saw Dr. Manhattan. He just couldn't understand him. And then he goes on to explain the whole thing about the metaverse, and Superman, he sees him attacking him. Either Superman destroys him or he destroys the, metaverse, which will destroy everything. Personally, I don't know why he thinks the Superman would destroy him. I know that he's confused on, well, the Superman attacks me and then the future's gone, so he had to either kill me. But you would think somebody as powerful as him, compared to especially Superman, he would know that Superman can't kill him. But whatever. After this, we have Lex Luthor talking to Lois Lane, as he also realizes, and he says, write your article from the Inform the World, tell them all various histories have been altered by a force beyond our universe. So he realizes that he's a force beyond their universe, affecting the universe directly and changing things. So now Superman and Dr. Manhattan finally meet up. Superman's confused on who he is, and he's getting attacked by other heroes, and Dr. Manhattan's there talking to him cryptically, and he's just confused. And Dr. Manhattan's like, well, this is the moment. I want to find out what happens. He sees Superman getting angry. He's like, is he going to kill me, or am I going to destroy the multiverse? Now he's confused. Superman lunges. He thinks he's going to hit him, so he just stands there and lets him go to hit him, which a lot of people try to lie and say Superman was too strong for him and was going to beat him. That wasn't the case. He was allowing it. He wanted to see. He was curious, kind of like when the rest of the Justice League members were attacking him and were able to blow him apart and he came back together. He was allowing it. But as he allowed it and Superman dashed, he thought he was going to hit him, but he was misinterpreting what happened. What in reality, he was not trying to kill him, and it wasn't like Dr. Manhattan was destroying the universe. What happened was there was a villain that was jumping in trying to attack Dr. Manhattan, and Superman jumped in to save him and knock him out. And then he said, why did you defend me? He's like, I don't know about thing about us all, but I don't know that right now. So Superman's like, I don't know why I did it, but he's like, that's just who I am. So because the whole thing about Dr. Manhattan is he lost hope and faith because of the Watchmen universe he came from was more darker and bleak, and he lost hope, and he saw Superman as a symbol of hope, but then he saw that Superman fights him, and he's like, why would the symbol of hope kill me if he's supposed to be a good guy? Does he lose his hope? So he's fighting with this whole internal conflict of, hope and despair, and Superman's the embodiment of that. So if he goes into this level, that would mean that he abandoned hope for despair, and he wants to find out why. But he realized that no, hope still lives on. Superman does not try to kill him. He just tries to save him. And as he realizes this, he tries to reset the multiverse once again and the timeline to change things and fix it from, because at this point there was a whole controversy about the story, right? And he was trying to change that to make things mellow out and go back to normal. And Ozymandias realizes this, and he was the one kind of setting it up to have Superman fight against him to fix his universe, and also give hope to John. So as this is happening, he says, so does the Legion. As the metaverse reforms, time catches up. So basically, Dr. Manhattan just goes back in time, changes the metaverse once again to fix things and set things right and make things better. And it happens, and Ozymandias realizes that he did change the timeline and now is just catching up to the point that they are now. And now the time has changed. The point they are now is no longer dangerous. Before, it was the heroes versus each other, but Dr. Manhattan fixed it and said, you know what? I finally found hope, and Superman did it. And he even says, I'm inspired. It's April 18th, 1938. The meadow winds as Superman lifts the 1937 Ford over his head, revealing himself to Metropolis. Decades later, police scientists are struck by the lightning. Birth of the Speed Force rattles the metaverse. Superman's timeline shifts forward and reality divides from first time creating this. And so basically what he says is he saw first, he was seeing the timeline going one direction and redoing itself over and over again naturally. Then he started messing with it because he was curious himself. So he was unnaturally messing with the timeline and changing things to see Superman and why he's important. And as he was doing that, he was actually messing things up. And he messed things up so bad to the point where the metaverse and the multiverse got messed up, and it created a big problem and situation. And since this problem got created by him messing with it, the universe realized it, caught him, and basically found out that, hey, this higher being is messing with me. And then not only did the universe realize it, but the beings within that universe also realized that, hey, this guy is messing with our timeline. We don't know who the hell he is, where he came from, but he is. And then they got the information with Ozymandias coming there. So he was just trying to understand because he's curious. He's like a child, but he was also lost hope because of how powerful he is. And he sees Superman as a symbol of hope, and he thought Superman destroyed him, and he lost his hope. But Superman did not destroy him. He saved him, which inspired him and said, you know what? I have all this godly power, and usually I've been just trying to avoid things because I feel like if I interfere, it's going to make things worse, and I don't have hope in, fixing things even with my power. But he realizes that if you do have great power like Superman, you're supposed to use it for the right things, and you can make a change. And he realizes that he can, so he's like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go back and fix things because I messed it up. It was my fault. I'm going to fix things, make things go back to the way they should be. And as it does, it changes all the time. And now he's explaining the story events after that in the course-corrected story. And then he's explaining all these other constant stuff. I'm going to skip those because it's not important, because he just talks about the past stuff and then the future and these other events. But there are some important events that he talks about, and I think this is DC stating what they were thinking at that time and what they want to do. They say that about like the 2026 and the 2030, this is the secret crisis. This is important because both DC and Marvel have their own events that have big changes. And Marvel is the Secret Wars, and DC is the Crisis event. So Secret Wars is a big change in Marvel, and DC Crisis is a big one. But this one is an amalgamation of both of the universes having a big change, which is the Secret Crisis. He says, beings throwing in Superman into the brawl across the universe, of Thor himself and the Green Behemoth stronger than even Doomsday, who dies protecting Superman from the invaders, and in its waking time, Superman's timeline shifts forward again. So I'm going to wrap this up because I know it's getting a little bit long. I want to make it shorter, but there was quite a bit of stuff to go through. This is important, and I remember I mentioned this a couple of times before, and I thought this was important too. This was basically DC saying that this was kind of their hope in the future at that time. They're saying, this is what we want in the future in 2026. We were hoping that this is how the story goes. And then in 2030, which is going to be in 5 years or less than 5 years, right? We're going to have a crossover event between both Marvel and DC. And we're going to take these big events because usually Marvel and DC have their own big events. Like I stated, Marvel has the Secret War story events, which has a big, effects on the cosmology as a whole. And then DC has the Crisis events, which also have their big, changes in their story as a whole. But now they're combining these big changes into a crossover and amalgamation. They used to have that in the past, but they haven't had it in a while. And I know they actually stated recently that they're going to be doing one. They're thinking of doing one recently, so that's pretty cool. But one thing I really wanted to talk about that I always thought was interesting that people keep on ignoring, and especially Death Battle. They state that both Superman and Thor brawl with each other, and then they state a green behemoth stronger than even Doomsday, who dies protecting Superman from the invaders. Do they say Thor was fighting against him? Do they mean Hulk dies from defending him, or Thor? If it's Hulk, it's fine because he's immortal, and that makes sense. If he dies, he can just revive himself later on. But he sacrificed himself to protect Superman, and that makes sense because they're going to have Superman fighting against the Hulk. Who wouldn't, want to see that? But the important thing is the Green Behemoth, obviously that's Hulk, and he's saying stronger than Doomsday, even stronger than him. So the fact that, Death Battle stated that Doomsday would beat Hulk is ridiculous. They themselves literally even stated a Green Behemoth who could defeat Doomsday. And the fact that DC fans still think that Doomsday could beat the Hulk is retarded. It's like, even DC themselves acknowledge that, yeah, the Hulk is stronger than Doomsday. And he has better immortality than Doomsday too. So he's stronger than him. So I don't want to hear anybody saying that, oh, Doomsday beats the Hulk. Hulk beats Doomsday. And Death Battle was completely wrong. They completely, ignore this. And then the final thing we get into is what happens is John has a son with his wife. He goes back in time and changes that with his situation. He has a son with his wife. And as he has a son with his wife, it's a weird thing because he creates him, but he also transfers his power and his consciousness into his child. So his power and his consciousness get transferred over into his child, and his child meets up with one of the girls, this girl who is Stargirl in the future, and he talks to her and says, John calls me Clark. This is obviously, he got inspiration from Superman Clark Kent, and then he created his own version of Clark Kent, which is just his son, who has his power. So this is kind of an amalgamation of Superman with Dr. Manhattan. It isn't an amalgamation, but it is. It's a little weird, I know. It's pretty much Dr. Manhattan's son, who is inspired and modeled off of Clark Kent, but also has his consciousness and DNA in him, but he's also separate. It's weird, but that's how comic books works. So he's technically like a Superman, Dr. Manhattan hybrid thing that he created from his hopes with Superman. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I know it's pretty confusing and complex, but this is important to the metal event story and death metal event story. I don't think Dr. Manhattan shows up in, I don't think he shows up in the death metal story event itself. I think he just shows up. This story does have some significance and importance there, but I don't think he shows up directly, is what I'm saying. So I thought that was important to get into. Now for the next video, or the next, DC story video I'm going to get into, is I'm going to be focusing 100% on the death metal story event. When I finish that, I will be getting into the stories after that. I think after the death metal event stuff happens, there's the future state. So if there's anything interesting in the future state story, I'll cover that. And then the infinite frontier. And then there was a couple of other things. I'm not going to do too much on, DC after that, because, the whole point was to go through the Crisis event, the Dark Metal event, and some of the Crisis events, because this was a big story arc happening throughout DC, especially in that time, right? So I felt like it was important to cover that, but I'm not going to do too much and just have all my videos, just dedicated on the whole thing. Maybe some point in the future, but not now. I think that's enough for this video, though. I think we covered enough, topics and discussions. I just want to say Dr. Manhattan is very powerful, but I do think that in this story, they do showcase that he does have limitations. There are things that he doesn't know about the future and the past, so he does have limitations on how far he can see and how far he can affect it. And even though he can mess with the timeline, he himself is not this godly being who has full control and he's above everything. He still has his limitations, and he himself acknowledges the fact that, yes, he can see the strings and he can affect them to a certain extent. He can do that, but he's also a puppet on the strings just like the rest of them. The only difference is he can see those strings and have some effect, whereas the rest, they usually can't, and they have literally no effect on it itself. And I know a lot of people try to use this to upscale Superman, saying Superman is comparable to Dr. Manhattan. He's not. Superman just is a big and important part of the story of DC because, outside of it, obviously, he was the first hero created, and they always go around him. That doesn't mean he controls the multiverse or is above the cosmology. It just means he has some importance in it, at least. So, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and stay tuned for next time.